Hi everybody, it's been a while since I filmed anything. I'm sitting here in COVID-19 quarantine, like most of you probably are. California's been quarantined now for about a month, and while I've still been getting out and running, I'm lucky to have an open space nearby my house where I can run the trails every morning. I haven't done anything that's really wilderness worthy. So I get a lot of questions about backpacking knives and what I would recommend for a backpacking knife, and more so the characteristics of a backpacking knife. And so I thought I'd talk a little bit about that today. Last year I did come up with that series of me testing the different backpacking knives that I was looking at. I was looking for a new backpacking knife. That knife specifically was to serve a specific purpose, that is, be a larger knife that I could take with me in the backcountry to allow me to clear some brush. But that's not necessarily the knife that I would recommend to everybody. Everybody's a little bit different. Everybody has their likes, their dislikes, what they're comfortable with, what they're not comfortable with. So I just thought I'd give some basics around what I look for. And again, everybody's different. What I look for may not be what the next person looks for. I mentioned this in the MKB7 video, but when I'm looking for a backpacking knife, I'm looking for something that's reliable and functional, first and foremost. Weight is a consideration when you're backpacking. It is with everything. But it's got to be something that you're comfortable using and that you enjoy using, and people should keep that in mind as well. So primary characteristics for me for a backpacking knife is something that's going to be a fixed blade. I don't want a folder that might have a locking mechanism that could possibly fail and close in on my fingers and then cause an injury out in the backcountry. That's the last thing you want. I've carried several different knives during my my life backpacking, starting with this little Buck 112 Ranger, and yes, it's a folding knife. It's a lockback folder, and I got this when I was 10 or 11 years old, and I used to camp with this and a hatchet. That's all I would have. I would have this and my hatchet, and I would camp and backpack with that. And for what I knew at the time, my skill level, the things that I was concerned about, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, I'm not really too concerned about self-reliance because typically have a parent with me. Whittling and cutting food and, cutting open fish. I had a hatchet to cut firewood with. I never went anywhere without my hatchet. And so I was happy. I wouldn't take this backpacking with me now, at least not as a primary knife. One, because I think the blade's too short. Two, also because it's fairly heavy. I think for being in the backcountry, at least for me, I think a 5 inches blade is a minimal length requirement. So this is a 5 inches blade, and if I was going to go out into the wilderness with nothing else but a knife, I would want at a minimum a knife that was 5 inches. And this is the Randall 25-5. Which is one of my more favorite knives. Lots of people go out, if you're a bushcrafter, then you probably go out with an axe or a saw and a knife, and that's perfectly fine. I don't do that anymore. Again, I used to go out with this knife and an axe. I don't do that anymore. I don't carry an axe. I don't carry a saw. I'd like to carry just a knife. For those people that bushcraft, they would typically carry something like this. So again, fixed blade. This is about 5 inches, maybe a little bit bigger than your standard bushcraft knife. But this is this is a dark timber custom bushcrafter, and this is the dark timber skinny woodsman. Now this is an excellent woods knife. It's got a sharp spine. It's you know, just the way that it's designed. I like the fact that it's got this finger groove, and the blade is close to your finger. You know, there's a debate out there around, you know, choils or no choils, and I think the one thing that some people don't understand about choils is that, you know, they're designed to bring your finger closer to the blade so that you have more control. So if I look at something like this, this is an excellent knife, but my finger is probably, well, in the well of the finger groove, it's probably almost an inch away from the blade. You know, I would prefer it would be up a little bit closer, and that's where, you know, that's where a choil comes in. You know, it puts your finger right there. You can get real close. You've got a lot of control, and that's what I like. Not everybody likes that. Now, again, there are plenty of people that go out with saws and with axes, and if you've got a saw or an axe, then, you know, your requirements are going to be different. You're not going to need to be, you know, to cut firewood. You're not going to need a knife to, you know, to, I don't know, maybe make an emergency splint or something, or shelter. You've got your saw, your axe to help you do that. In that scenario, then, you know, I would still like a 5-inch knife, but, you know, something like this, which is 4 inches. It's the FOBOS Tier 1 Mini. I mean, that would be absolutely, you know, perfectly serviceable. You know, if I had a saw and an axe and this knife in the wilderness, I would be perfectly happy with that. You know, the reasons that I go out with a larger knife is because I want something that's going to help me process firewood. I want something that's going to help me build a shelter. This knife is long enough that I can, you know, that I can cross baton it into fairly large wood that would help me do that. When I moved out to California after my first, you know, my first Sierra trip, I decided, you know, hey, I'm out here now by myself. You know, before I used to go with groups. I used to go with my parents. There were other people that I could rely on. When I came out here, the only person that I could really rely on was myself. So I needed a knife that I could use in emergency situations. And I think that's really where the larger knife comes into play. So for a lot of years, I went out in the backcountry with this. This is the Chris Reeve Mountaineer II, 5.5-inch knife. And the idea was that this was my primary knife, and this folder here was my secondary knife. This is just a cheapy little folder by Tool Logic. I bought it at REI, and the only reason I picked it up was because it had a fire still on the back, and it had a whistle. And I basically wore this as a neck knife for about 20 years with this as my primary knife on my side. Why do I say that I want a bigger knife? But when I went out, I primarily used this knife. Well, I went out with 2 knives. And the idea behind this knife as my primary knife was the primary knife was only to be used when it had to be used. Most of the you know, most of the chores that you're going to have in the backcountry, if you're not processing wood and you're not processing food, so if you're a backpacker that carries you know, pre-processed dehydrated food, you're not going to need to use a larger knife very often. So the idea was that, you know, this is the knife that I would use the majority of the time, and this is the knife that I would keep, you know, as sharp as possible, so I wouldn't use it in, you know, for emergencies. Those times, or, you know, when I needed to build a fire, or when I needed to build a shelter, I would use this. A couple years ago, I adopted the honey badger as my primary knife, and because I started trying to cut weight because of my back issues, I started carrying just one knife again. Honey badger is a great knife. Maybe not the smartest thing to go into the wilderness with just one knife, but, you know, for the last couple years, that's what I've done. I've been very careful about making sure that this knife is on me at all times, because you never know, you know, you never know when you're going to need your knife. If you leave camp for some reason and you know, you slip and fall down a hill and you can't get back up, then you know, at least you've got your knife to help you out in some way. Last year, when I started looking for a new backpacking knife, you know, of course I found this, and this is going to be one of my primary backpacking knives this year, if we ever get out. I'm hearing that in Oregon, the national forests are closed until September, and I'm really hoping that that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen in California. I don't think that makes much sense. So this year, this is going to be one of my primary knives, but I'm going back to the two knife scenario this year, and so I'm gonna be carrying this, or I'm gonna be carrying, you know, the Honey Badger, or I'm gonna be carrying the FOBOS MKB7. And what I will also be carrying is the Dark Timber Tavi. So you can see this is a tiny, tiny, tiny little blade. It is about 3 inches, and this will be my secondary knife. So this will be the knife that I use for all of the little stuff. If I'm going to gut a fish, if I'm going to cut cordage, if I even need to start a fire, I can use this knife. This is going to be the knife that I keep in reserve for helping me clear trails, you know, helping me process firewood, helping me build a shelter if I need to, helping, you know, build a splint or a stretcher. This is the knife that I will keep for doing that. So I guess that's all I had to say. I didn't really have any prepared words. You know, I would just say in conclusion, you know, if you're looking for a backpacking knife, in my mind, you know, a 5-inch blade is going to be the absolute smallest that you should get. I know this is a big knife for some people, and I understand that, and not everybody's comfortable with a larger knife. And if you're one of those people that's not comfortable with a larger knife, if you're more comfortable carrying something like this, or, you know, or carrying something like this, or, you know, these, geez, people have carried bucks, you know, buck 112s, buck 110s in the backcountries for decades. And, you know, people have survived with a buck 110, which is, you know, a little bit longer than this. You know, so it's, you know, it's possible. If you're one of those people that you're just not comfortable carrying a fixed blade, you're not comfortable carrying something, you know, of this size, well, then just give some considerations into what your needs are going to be when you're out in the backcountry, and, you know, do some contingency planning. If you're not comfortable carrying this, or you're not comfortable, you know, carrying this, and you really want to carry something like this, you know, then have a saw with you, or have an axe with you. Have some sort of plan for getting out of a jam. And that's really, you know, to me, that's what knives are in the backcountry. They're tools, and they're tools to help you with things you need to do. And what are you going to need to do? Well, for me, it's typically cordage, it's typically processing food, it is occasionally building a fire, and then it's the emergency planning. You know, what if I go out and something happens and I lose my pack? Well, I always have my knife on me, and so with that, I can, you know, I can build a shelter. And one of the things that I make sure that I do. So this is all of my knives. The sheets for all my knives have this. So I've got some sort of cordage, and this is survivor cord. So this has got it's got multiple strands of paracord within it. It's got snare wire, which I'm not a trapper, so I probably never use that. But it's got jute twine, which I have used and I have practiced with, and it's waterproof jute twine at that. So, you know, that is the perfect tinder bundle, or at least the perfect ignition point for a tinder bundle. All of my sheaths have a fire still. I also carry a lighter, but if I get separated from my pack, this is always on my hip. And that's the one thing, you know, if you're going to carry a knife in the backcountry, the one rule that I live by is you always have your knife on you. There's never a time when you don't have your knife on you. Should something happen, should you slip off a rock, should you fall down a hill, or should you run into an animal and it chases you away from your camp late at night and you need to start a fire and you need to build a shelter, well, you've got your knife with you to do that. So with this setup as I have it here, I've got the ability to build a shelter, I've got the ability to start a fire, and that's really all I would need to get through the night. Now, over multiple days, then you're talking about, okay, well, boiling water, getting food, hiking out, all of that sort of stuff comes into play. But this is going to give me the bare bones. So if you've survived to this point in the video, then I'm going to give you a little bit of a bonus, and that is when the channel reaches 333 users, I am going to release a video that I have on the channel right now that isn't open to the public. Now, many of you may have seen my Cottonwood Lakes video from last year. I think that video is maybe, I don't know, maybe it's 20 minutes, I don't remember. But I've got a long version of that. And the long version is basically me fishing cottonwood in detail. And it basically shows exactly where I'm fishing, what I'm fishing, and the fish that I caught. More so than the video that I released to the general public. So when I reach 333 subscribers, I'm going to release that video for 12 hours. Probably 12 hours. Basically from the time I wake up in the morning until I go to bed. It'll be 12 hours-ish. For those of you that get to catch that and have caught this, I hope you enjoy that video as well as this video. Thanks for watching.